What?
I just saw this tweet that said they should let Ted Kaczynski out of jail for a day to see the Minions movie in 3D. Notorious technology hater Ted Kaczynski.
I feel like love that. Yeah, I feel like Ted would get a kick out of the Minions movie.
Yeah.
He's
like, you know what, I was
He
wrong.
goes to the theater in his jumpsuit lens. It's like this.
I was wrong.
Technology's great.
The Industrial Revolution has produced some.
I think you'd have an aneurysm, honestly. Hello, and welcome back to the Conspiracy Couple Podcast. I'm Marisa.
And I'm Ethan.
And today we are back with another very interesting episode and a wonderful, exciting guest. Oh, that's me. That's Jaclyn. Okay, so if you did not listen to or watch part 1 or last week's episode, then you should do that, first of all.
Yeah.
But second of all, we would like to just shout out my sister Jaclyn, who is back on with us to continue our conversation on the JonBenet Ramsey case. And as Ethan pointed out in the last part, Jaclyn is our first repeat guest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Going on episode number 3.
Episode number 3. So hopefully...
Does this make her a 3-time guest or a 2-time guest?
I think 3 times.
But this is technically, I mean, it's 3 episodes, but this is one of the, it's back.
What do you think?
3
This
times.
is her 3rd time. So hopefully this will not be the last time.
Follow her on Instagram at Snoopygrams.
No.
Do you want to see all of her Snoopy the dog?
No.
What's that one? What's the Instagram for that egg that became really famous?
I don't know. I don't think
The
it
egg.
exists
There was that
anymore.
egg.
I don't know.
The egg that took over the
Most liked
Kylie
picture.
Jenner.
Yeah.
I don't think it exists anymore.
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty
And
sure
then they
it's
had
just
the
like
picture of
egg.
Dr. Phil's face on the egg.
That was funny.
That was funny.
That was good.
You should pull that up on YouTube.
No. That's absolutely not worth my time.
Okay, well, I disagree, but
Yeah, you're not the one that has to do the editing.
I just do the 13 pages of research.
I would argue it takes me longer to edit.
Anyways,
I am not going to comment.
Anyways,
I could do the research. You couldn't do the editing.
I definitely could not do the editing. 100%. It would be an American tragedy to see me. Yeah, specifically American tragedy on this 4th of July that we are recording this on.
But this is 2 weeks separated from 4th of July,
Correct.
so it's
Yes,
no longer
that's
relevant.
correct. But yeah, so as always, make sure you follow us on all of our social medias. We have Instagram, Conspiracy Couple. We have TikTok, Conspiracy Couple Podcast. And we have YouTube, Conspiracy Couple Podcast. So make sure you like, follow, subscribe, and turn on post notifications for all of those. And make sure you share us with a friend on social media or give us a shout out. I always love to see those. So yeah, Ethan does have an update. We're working on getting a new logo and potentially some merch.
Probably next week
Probably next week.
for the logo.
For the logo, yep.
Nice.
So,
And potential merch.
and the logo that we were working with is really cute. So yeah, we're really excited for you guys to
Here's a
see
sneak peek right here. Boom. I'm just kidding. I'm
You're not gonna do that? Oh, okay.
Because what if we change it?
Then that'd be embarrassing.
Yeah.
That'd be really embarrassing.
No, you'll
So,
you'll see it next week.
Next week we'll do our big debut. All right, so if you guys did not listen to or watch last week's episode, it was part 1 where we laid out the information of the JonBenet Ramsey case. We laid out the details of the day, the investigation, and the family, and a lot of the things that made the investigation go wrong and that were very problematic about the investigation. So make sure you catch up on that. But basically, just a little bit refresher. No?
Don't give a refresher.
No refresher. You have to go watch it.
Yeah.
Okay, so no refresher.
Well, they don't need a refresher. They just watched it.
That's true.
A week ago.
And you
Well,
should be able
yeah.
to remember a week ago. Anyways, so now we're going to be talking about some of the theories surrounding who was responsible for JonBenet Ramsey's murder. And so, as I said, there was never anybody charged, but there are a lot of theories. And all of the theories kind of revolve around the two most popular theories, and that are the family theory and the intruder theory. So the first one we're going to start out with is the family theory. And that is the theory that one of the members of her family was responsible.
Only one?
At least one.
At least one.
Right.
Somebody in the family.
Family within the family, and that's kind of based off of the, there were 4 people in the house and one of them died. And so this was born really out of a lot of public speculation and criticism of not only the parents' behavior after her death, but also some of the evidence found at the crime scene. And so the main thing that kind of got people questioning was that they thought that they weren't acting right, or they weren't emotional enough after her death. And Jaclyn mentioned this, but we know that grief doesn't manifest itself the same way for every person. So to say someone is a murderer because they aren't outwardly sad enough
Right.
isn't a good way to establish a suspect.
Yeah.
So that was like what got people first thinking, I think that there's something kind of sketchy here. And that they were acting weird. Also, if you think about it statistically, when a person is murdered, usually the family members or the spouse are always going to be the first person
Right.
of interest, and they are most of the time the person who's responsible. And on the 2020 special that I watched about this, they brought in an expert about forensics, and he said that when a child of this age dies, it is most of the time at the hands of their parents.
That's awful.
And it's horrible and it's hard to imagine, but we know that it happens. And as he said, most of the time when someone or a child is murdered or passes away, it's because of one of their family members, usually their parents. And so, yeah, that is hard to rationalize, but it's the statistics.
Right.
So over the years, the media and the police have kind of shifted from different family members. But most of the blame is put onto Patsy. And so we're going to start by talking about some of the weird behavior. So one of the things that really got people thinking this is kind of weird is that John apparently called the pilot of his plane to try to arrange a flight to Atlanta for him and the family within minutes of finding his daughter's body.
What?
Yes.
Like a private plane?
A private plane. So he called.
Suspicious.
So he called, and this is like something that happened, that he called the plane's pilot and was trying to arrange a flight for the family out of Colorado and to Atlanta. So John said that this was because they were from Atlanta and that the police had taken over their home and that they just wanted to go back home.
I mean, I understand that maybe like a couple days later.
Right. Not literally right after you found your daughter's dead body.
Yeah.
It kind of, to me, gives the impression of like fleeing the scene.
Yeah.
Because you'd think that you would want to stay and see and be involved in the investigation.
How do you even have a clear enough mind to think about that literally a minute into finding your daughter's body?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that like if you look at parents who are typically, their children are murdered or kidnapped, like you see a lot of parents who like years and years and years later refuse to move out of the area
Right.
where the crime happened because they're like, I need to be there. I need to be involved in the investigation.
Right.
I need to like be available.
I feel like the thing is like whenever something like this happens, whenever a traumatic event, like you're going through some sort of state of shock. And like we already talked about, everyone will experience that shock differently. You never have the wherewithal to be thinking, oh, well, my dead daughter was just found, so that means the police are going to be all over my house, so I should figure out where my family is going to stay. Like, how is
Yeah.
that what you're thinking about the moment after you found your daughter? Like, that just doesn't make any sense at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. It really doesn't.
So I think it's interesting is that a lot of the weird behavior was John, but most of the suspicion of the perpetrator is Patsy.
That's interesting. Why is that?
We'll get into this. So obviously it's shifted, and some people think John did it, some people think Patsy did it, but a lot of people think that her brother Burke did it. So remember Burke was Ramade's 9-year-old brother.
Yeah, where was he during all of this?
We're gonna get into
Probably
this.
in bed.
We're getting into this. Okay. So people think that either Patsy or Burke or potentially John accidentally killed JonBenet and that the rest of the family worked together to cover it up. And so at the time of the murder, we're going to talk about Burke first. At the time of the murder, Burke was 9. And his parents claimed that he was asleep the whole night and that he did not wake up until a few hours after the police were called and came to the house. So...
Okay.
I mean, possible.
That's kind of suspicious to me. I mean, he could be a very heavy sleeper, but imagine your sister is missing. Your parents call the police, who arrive at the scene just before 6 in the morning. A full-on investigation is going on, and then we have a whole bunch of people storming into the house who are cleaning up, who are moving around, who are doing all this stuff, and you sleep through the whole thing.
I mean, yeah.
But you're 9.
I feel
Like,
like
you
that
don't
almost
understand.
that almost points more to the weird how the parents were treating it, because it didn't seem like they were like freaking out ever, and doing anything to cause him to wake up.
Right. So
Like they weren't screaming or like calling out JonBenet's name. Like they weren't trying to. They were just like, oh, let's call the police.
Patsy was quite emotional on the 911 call.
Okay.
So like, if you listen to the 911 call, she's not like, "Hey guys, I just saw this ransom
Well,
note."
yeah.
She's screaming, "My daughter's
No,
been kidnapped."
I was
yeah.
exaggerating that, but I mean, yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like it's plausible to think that he slept through a lot of it, but yeah, once people started showing up, maybe it's a little. I
Yeah.
don't know, but
Yeah. Another thing. So remember how we talked about how she had pineapple in her stomach, and then there was the pineapple bowl in the picture. So Burke's fingerprints were found on the bowl.
Mhm.
The thing is, fingerprints aren't time sensitive, so that means that he
touched
held the
at
bowl
some
at one
point.
point.
Yeah.
I feel like that really doesn't.
And
And
he's-
if
it's
she
his-
if she ate pineapple, likely he did too. So.
Right, and it's his house. So it's not unusual that he would have his fingerprints on a bowl in the house.
Right.
Kids touch a lot of stuff.
Kids touch a lot of
Oh,
stuff
they
and
touch
they're kind of
everything.
sticky.
Yeah.
Kids just tend to be sticky.
Mhm.
Gross, little gremlins.
Yeah. So the 911 operator also reported that she could have heard Burke in the background of the call Patsy made to the police after she found the ransom note. So the family says that Burke was asleep, that he was not present when she made the 911 call. Also, the clip from the call has been like really heavily analyzed, and it has been determined that if it was even a voice in the background, they don't even know if it was a voice or if it was just a noise. And that they're like, well, I can't say this is Burke's voice. I can't even
Yeah.
say it's a person.
It's odd of her to pick out by
Speculate
name
that,
that it was
yeah.
Burke specifically instead of just like I heard a man or like I heard another
I
voice.
heard a
Right.
voice in
But
the
here the thing
background.
is, like, I listened. You can't, like, I was like,
I didn't hear a single thing when
Like,
I
you
maybe
know-
possibly.
you
but-
know when they have, like, those ghost hunter shows?
Yes.
And they're like, oh my gosh, the ghost very clearly said, get out. And then you just hear, like, and you're like,
Yeah. Oh.
I don't know by whose standards this is very clear, but it's kind of like that. Like the lady's like, "Oh, I heard Burke's voice." When I listened, I was like waiting and waiting and waiting, and then it ended, and I was like, "Oh, I only heard Patsy."
Yeah.
But the thing is,
I didn't
so
hear
in
it.
the call, Patsy keeps talking after the call is over, and what it is reported that she says is, "Okay, I called them. Now what?" And people say that she was talking to John and to Burke about what their next plan was going to be. The thing is, I can also see her saying, "Okay, I called them. Now what? Like, do
Like,
we
what
just
should we do?
Like, do we just
Yeah.
wait? Like,
Yeah.
And also, the turnaround time that the police came
They're very fast.
was 3 minutes. And
Very
so
fast.
She doesn't have time to be like, "Okay, I called them. Now what? Let's come up with this elaborate plan."
Right.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: if they killed her or covered it up or whatever, they did it before they called.
Right.
100%. There's no way they were, unless they just like stashed her body beforehand, and then they were like trying to figure out what to do, and then maybe while the police were there, when John found the
Right.
body, he was like setting stuff up. I don't know. If they were involved, it all happened. It had to have happened before the call.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So the
They didn't
question,
have time to
right,
do that.
right. And the question here is, what is the motive for Burke to kill his sister? And the main motive that people have brought up is jealousy, and that potentially he was jealous about her because she got a lot of attention from her parents in regards to like the pageants and the money and all of this stuff that was spent on her and the time spent on her, and that he could have perceived that she was the favorite, and that he was kind of like this forgotten child. And if you've experienced those feelings of like, I am not my parents' favorite, it's not a pleasant feeling, and it's something that a lot of people like have a lot of mental stuff about.
Yeah.
And so maybe he was playing and he lashed out and accidentally killed her.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that they think, oh, he was jealous, he had this resentment towards his little sister. One day he snapped and his parents helped cover it up.
I used to be more on board with that theory than I am now, only because he's 9. Like, if that was the parents' first instinct, was to like come up with this elaborate ransom story, like when one child accidentally kills the other, like that doesn't really make sense to me. Like, they're not gonna like arrest their other 9-year-old son. Like, if they had actually called the police and been like, hey, like there was an accident, like nothing probably would have happened to him because he was a child and
Right.
it truly was an
And
accident.
his parents are wealthy.
And
Yeah.
if she was the favorite, why would they?
But the thing is,
Favor
now the
him in
question
this.
is, the feeling is, well, they lost one child, they don't want to lose another one to jail.
Well, they're
He's
not going to put a
gonna
9-year-old in
9-year-old
jail.
Like, he'd probably
He would
go
probably
to
just
like
go to therapy.
a therapy or a juvenile hall or something like that. And they're very wealthy, so they probably could have worked out something
Right.
else.
There
as
were
well.
more.
Right.
If this happened and they were to cover it up, there were much easier, simpler ways to cover it up than
Yeah.
like a fake kidnapping gone wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Boulder police never indicated at any point that they believed Burke was a suspect.
Yeah.
It always was kind of a thought. And then we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but in 2016, Burke did a interview with Dr. Phil. And that's what we watched. And when I watched that, I was like, oh, no. He was the guy who did it, because it was so weird. And he just behaved very awkwardly and weirdly. But I remember at the time, our mom was like, his sister was murdered when he was 9.
Right.
His family's been the subject of like intense scrutiny
Yeah.
for years and years and years and years and years. How do you expect him to act?
Yeah. That's
That's
a
all
really
right.
valid point.
Yeah, it is, and it is possible that he was involved in like a
Or he was
cover-up, whether
aware,
or not that
yeah.
he actually did the killing of her. Because again, I'm like, yeah, a 9-year-old killing him killing his 6-year-old sister on accident. To me, that's like, you don't come up with this elaborate cover story to cover that
You
up.
then would just
Right.
say, oh, she fell or something.
Yeah.
You just come up with like, if you're going to cover that up, you come up with a different story, like a much more simpler to explain. To me, if this is true, if it was the family, it is either the dad or the mom or them together, like either killing her, probably on accident, because I can't imagine why they would. Again, as
It's
suspicious
so
as the
hard to
family
imagine.
is, why wouldn't you just come up with a simpler explanation?
Yeah, and what's really troubling to me is like, if there was some sort of like combination, the cause of death was like strangulation plus head
Right.
trauma. Like, I understand if it was an accident,
But that seems like
but
overkill.
it's overkill to like duct tape her mouth and like
Yeah.
tie like a
And
rope
here's the
around her
thing
neck. Like,
is-
that's demented.
and she was also
for the family to do.
abused.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's-
It's more than an accidental death.
yeah.
It's very personal.
Yeah.
Which is why I can see
But
maybe
then
it
there's
wasn't
also the question
family.
that it was the first that there was the blow to the head. The mom thought, oh my gosh, she's dead. She wasn't dead. So then they staged the crime scene, did all those other additional things to stage the crime
tied
scene.
a rope around her neck.
Yes. So
Did-
they did all these other things to stage the crime scene to cover up the fact that she thought she had passed away from the blow to the head. But that seems also like that a parent would,
To go
like,
through
assault
all of
their
that,
child.
she would have
Yeah,
woken
awful.
up before then, and they would have realized she's not dead.
yeah.
Like, you don't, when you get knocked unconscious, you aren't out that long. It's not like in the movies when you're out for like a day.
I mean, I wouldn't know. But
it's not how it works.
But and there is evidence that she was awake when she was being strangled.
It's
Right.
just really hard to
And it
picture
just-
the family
and
taking
It's
it
hard to
to that
believe
level.
that it's an
Yeah.
accidental killing.
And it also just makes you think like, why would a parent do any of these things to their child?
Right.
I know it happens, but it's hard to
Yeah.
get your head into.
To me,
Yeah.
there's no way that it was an accident that they covered up. To me, this is very purposeful.
Yes.
It feels like a very purposeful killing.
So now we're gonna kind of talk about some of the things that point towards the parents.
Okay.
So we talked about Burke, and now we're gonna talk more about the parents.
Okay.
So regardless of the fact that they were initially interviewed together, in the years and media appearances following, their stories were not very consistent. They chose not to cooperate with the investigation with the police unless it was on their terms, but they did multiple televised interviews, which people found to be very suspicious. So they refused to participate in a second formal interview with the police unless they were allowed to review the evidence the police had. And the family has come out and said that the reason they didn't want to cooperate is because they were afraid the police would slant the investigation towards them because they felt they were easy targets.
They're making themselves look like easy
Yeah,
targets.
they really
Right.
are.
That's the
Especially
thing.
like if you believe that like the person who killed your daughter is out there and at large, like would you not be like super eager to
Right.
help literally however you can?
Yeah. Like I understand. Okay, so I understand this. I remember I was listening to a Dr. Phil podcast and he was like, anytime you have any interaction with the police or law enforcement, you get a lawyer. Whether or not you're innocent or guilty, it does not matter. You get a lawyer. And he's like, I'm not saying like don't participate in investigations, but it's like if they would have just said, I need a lawyer, people always look at that as being like, oh, you got to be guilty. No, that's just the wise thing to do. But like to say like I'm not going to cooperate until I
Yeah,
see what
that's-
evidence you have,
Yeah, that's going
That's
further.
weird.
it's just like why?
It's like, why? Is there evidence against you?
Yeah.
Like, why do you
Yeah.
need to see the evidence?
Yeah.
So the thing that really like was very suspicious for a lot of people, they were not really cooperating with the police. However, 5 days after the murder, they participated in a televised interview on CNN, which a lot of people thought was really suspicious.
Yes.
Yeah.
So John actually later came out and said that he regretted doing that,
It's a very bad look.
but that he was just like wanting
they're
to get
doing-
information out.
It's like they're trying to do all the wrong things.
Yeah. And he's like, they thought that they were going to be targets anyways, but he's like, I just wanted the story to get out because I didn't feel that the police were doing a good job, which they weren't. But
Well, clearly.
which is true, and I can understand the desire to take it to the media, but to take it to the media before you exhaust the police.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ransom note that Patsy discovered was very suspicious in a number of ways as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the note had been written on stationery and a pen that was from the home.
So they wrote the note there.
That
The note was-
seals the deal for me.
The note was written
That
in the
it was
home.
one
That it was
family.
somebody from the family,
Yes.
at least like helping in some capacity. Because if you're trying to like
So they take
break into a house
they
and
take a
kidnap
piece of
somebody,
pen
you
and-
want to be as quick as possible.
so they
right?
look for a pen and they look for stationery.
Also, how do you like? What are they gonna do? Like, unless they knew exactly where the pen and paper was, like you'd have to search the house for it.
So
And,
this
like, how long would that
yeah,
take?
that specific finding, knowing that it was written on stationery and a pen from the house, led a lot of people to question the validity of the note.
Yeah.
Also, the ransom amount. Remember how you said it was a very specific number?
Yes.
So the ransom amount was $118,000.
Mm-hmm.
So come to find out that ransom number was the exact number, the exact amount of the Christmas bonus that John had received from his company that year.
Weird.
So this led John to suspect, he said, that the crime was committed by someone who worked with him and who knew how much he had made in his Christmas bonus.
That's a big bonus.
It is a big bonus. I got a turkey for Christmas for my Christmas bonus. Well, actually, it was a turkey or a ham, and it was a big ham. But $118,000, you could buy a much bigger ham.
You could buy quite a few hams.
You could buy a lot of hams.
You should buy a whole ham farm.
It's not a ham farm.
I know.
It's not
It's a pig farm, but
So the police investigated that whole "does he work with John" thing, and didn't turn up anything.
Right.
The note was also really wordy.
yeah. I
So it
noticed that
was
when
3
you were reading it.
pages. And this is a lot more than a usual ransom note, according to the FBI.
Especially if you're writing it in the house
Yeah.
where you are like
If
about to kidnap somebody.
I don't ever plan on writing a ransom note, but if I were to do it, I think I would say, I've kidnapped your daughter. Give me this much money, and you'll have her back. Don't call the cops.
Right.
Dear Ethan.
Keep it as brief as possible.
Sincerely, Ethan.
So the note also had a lot of exclamation marks, which was unusual.
They're very excited.
So think about people who write with a lot of words and who write with a lot of like punctuation. Who are those people typically?
Educated people.
Educated people. Who else?
Not career criminals.
Now let's just look at the difference between
Excited
writing styles
people.
between men and women.
Oh.
I use lots of exclamation points when writing professional emails.
Okay, yes. So like usually men and women write things very differently.
Right.
I guess.
A forensic pathologist named Michael Braden was consulted, and he said he had never seen a ransom note like that in his career, and that he highly doubted the note was written by someone outside of the home. There were also random spelling errors on very easy words, such as the word possession. But more difficult words, such as the word attaché, were spelled correctly and with the correct punctuation marks.
I'm not even sure I would know how to.
I don't even know what that
attaché.
means.
Me neither.
I don't even know what that means. That's a rich person word.
Attaché, isn't it like a piece of furniture or something?
That's a rich person word.
Marissa just spelled it correctly, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because I watched the show where they talked about it. Oh,
My parents' Wi-Fi.
my parents' Wi-Fi is not good. They live out in the boonies.
Yeah. Sure do.
Also, the only fingerprints that were found on the ransom notes were the detectives and Patsy's. A number of handwriting experts were also interviewed, and the results were split. So some people thought that Patsy wrote the note, while others said she did not.
What are we doing here?
So
How are we not able to get how are they not able to tell if it's her or not?
So handwriting analysis is not very like concrete.
Still.
Right.
It's kind of like a polygraph test.
Yeah.
Like it's something that you use in addition to other evidence.
It's something you use in a TV show and that's enough evidence.
Right. So the police did handwriting analysis of the note, and they were conclusively able to rule out John and Burke.
Okay.
However, Patsy's ruling was inconclusive.
So it's potentially her.
Right. Get this, okay? There was also a practice note that was found near the finished note.
Oh my god.
It just screams inside job.
Yes. So
Yeah.
someone, the ransom person had started writing the note, had practiced what they were going to say, ripped that out, and then started again.
Okay, like how long did they have? How
Apparently
long did they have
unlimited
to
time.
commit-
Had unlimited time. So the investigators had the family follow through as if they were going to give the ransom money to the kidnappers, which doesn't make sense
Yeah,
because
it doesn't.
at this point, like everyone knows that she's dead,
Right.
and of course nobody shows up
Right.
Wait, when did they have them?
the next day.
The next day?
Why?
The time on the note.
Why?
So remember, the time on the note was December 27th because they thought maybe the person will
Right.
come to get the money.
Maybe they thought you didn't find her dead body.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's just play devil's advocate, and let's say the letter is legit. Why would they go to the work to, first of all, write a practice note? No, find the stationery, find a pen, write a practice note, decide they don't like that one, write a new ransom note, a very long ransom note, 3 pages, leave it in the house, knowing that JonBenet was dead the whole time. That
And-
she was dead
Exactly.
inside the
Well,
house.
my
Any
thinking-
intruder would think the parents are going to look around the house.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they're not gonna think like
Although in their case they didn't.
they're not
Here's
gonna
the-
think like she's dead, but I think I can still get my money out of them.
Here's the thing that you do is you do like they kill her, and they think maybe we can like still somehow get the money.
Mm-hmm.
And they're writing the note, and they are planning on removing her from the house, but then the mom wakes up because they took so long because they were handwriting the note
Yeah.
and everything, and so they're like, oh crap! They panic and they hide her body, and then they aren't able to, remove the body. And
Because
when
it's
all
the only
people,
thing that had any evidence of being broken was the window in the basement.
and then when all the people are there, they sneak out they're able to like blend in with the crowd and stuff like that. Like that's the only thing that would make sense potentially as a not the family, but at the same time that still is like ignoring a whole lot of evidence that makes it seem that the family did it.
Yeah.
Or at
So
least someone in the family did it.
one of the fibers found on the duct tape that was found in JonBenet's mouth matched fibers from the clothes that Patsy had been wearing. However, devil's advocate, Patsy lived in the house,
Yeah.
so it's not outside of the realm of
I
possibility.
mean, they used
Yeah.
their stationery and their pen. Maybe they used their duct tape.
Maybe. The paintbrush that was used to make the weapon belonged to Patsy's art set.
Okay.
And of course, the question is, what would be the motive
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking.
for
this
the
whole
parents to
time.
kill their child? So this is the most popular motive that has been brought up. And this has been brought by the media. And this is that JonBenet went to her mother and told her that she had wet the bed again. Patsy was exhausted and frustrated, and she either pushed her or she hit her, and she accidentally killed her, and that the family covered it up.
Again, why wouldn't you just say she fell down the stairs?
Also,
It's very
she was hit
extreme.
on the back of the head. So she was hit, blunt force trauma to the back of the head. There is evidence that she was alive when she was strangled. And this seems like an incredibly extreme reaction for the mom of a 6-year-old. I mean, here's the thing. Children, even after kids are potty trained, they have accidents.
Right.
Like, this is her second child. Like, she probably is, she's like, I'm not going to get mad at my kid for, like, she was interviewed and she said, I would not kill my child over wetting the bed.
Yeah.
It just
And-
everything. The thing is, like, everything that was done to JonBenet just speaks to it being a purposeful killing. Like, it just does
Yes.
not. She was beaten. She was strangled. She was tased. Like,
She was also abused. The thing that was used to harm her was the same paintbrush that was used to strangle her. So and the idea here is that the initial blow was an accident. The family panics and they staged the crime to make it look worse. They staged the crime in order to say someone broke in and killed her.
but again, if you accidentally kill your daughter, even if you are like, oh my gosh, we have to cover this up. Like, if you accidentally kill your daughter, like a person you presumably love and like have been taken care of for the past 6 years, how could you possibly do all of that to her? Like, accidentally killing someone is one thing, but doing all of that afterwards, plus like finishing the job by strangling, like that, it cannot be an accident.
Yeah, because if it was an accident, when they found out that she wasn't dead from just being hit on the head, wouldn't they be like relieved?
Oh, great, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they would be like, oh my gosh, she's okay, call the hospital, take her to the hospital.
Yeah.
Because like, and then then of course there's the thing, well, what if she remembers? Well, then you could just say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, like, it's a
Better
child,
than
she's also
murdering
6,
your
like,
daughter.
yeah.
like little kids like don't have very long attention spans, and if it was truly an accident, then the mom and her could have had a conversation, could have like rectified their relationship, and she probably would have just gone to the doctor, been fine. Maybe there would have been an investigation that was opened, but as we know, very wealthy people get away with a lot of things.
Yeah.
And
Again, better than a murder investigation.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
an alternative motive is that John was abusing JonBenet, and that he had to kill her to cover up the abuse with the help of his family because she was going to come clean about it.
But then why? And then,
The thing is, there's no evidence
yeah.
that this was the case. There's no evidence that this was a prolonged thing, except for, at the time of her murder. And so I think to accuse any person or to accuse a parent of something like that without evidence
Yeah.
is a truly horrific thing to do.
It's horrible. But I am going to go out and say that, out of all the family related theories, it's the one that I believe the most.
If that, yeah, because that's the thing, and that's the thing I've been saying the whole time. Is if it was someone in the family, it has to have been on purpose.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if it was on purpose, you need a motive, and all the other motives make no sense. And like even this one, there's no evidence, and like heaven forbid that is what happened. Like the fact of the matter is that this little girl was murdered and tortured, and you don't do that to cover up an accident.
No.
You only do that if you intend on killing that little girl.
Yeah.
Which is obviously horrific, but like it just has to have been on purpose. It has to.
Yeah.
And there is evil in the world, and
Right.
harming a child in general is evil.
Awful.
So it's you don't also want to think like caregivers, because like parents are supposed to protect their child,
Right.
and so when you think of it, like it's hard to wrap your head around, and I think it has become very sensationalized, and it's hard for a rational person to even think about that.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of speculation around them, and in December 1999, a grand jury in Boulder, Colorado, voted to indict the Ramseys for their suspected role in the murder on charges of child endangerment and obstruction of justice. However, the district attorney declined to continue with the charges because he claimed there was insufficient evidence. So initially, the police thought that Patsy herself had written the ransom note, and then of course that they had staged the crime scene to cover up who was actually responsible for the murder. And DNA evidence that was collected from the scene seemed to exonerate the entire family of any involvement. So that's the family theory. So now we move on to the non-family theories. And there are a lot of non-family theories. I didn't cover all of them. Some of them are a friend of the family, a coworker of John's. So I'm just going to talk about a couple. So the first one is a man named Bill McReynolds. So he had apparently visited the Ramsey house 2 days before JonBenet's murder, and he was known to dress up as Santa Claus around the holidays. And his own daughter had been kidnapped in 1974, which was about 20 years before JonBenet's death. And his wife had also written a play about a young girl who was assaulted and killed in a basement.
That's
I
dark.
understand artistic freedom, but that's very dark, and it's very concerning. And apparently he also felt that he was very close to JonBenet. So according to the Denver Post, McReynolds was quoted as saying, "Her murder was harder than my operation." He had a heart operation. "She made a profound change in me." And apparently while he was dressed as Santa one time, JonBenet gave him a gift of a bottle of glitter, which is like such a cute little gift that a little girl would give. So he was apparently so moved by this gift that when he was having his heart surgery, he brought this bottle of glitter with him into surgery. And he apparently asked his wife that if and when he passed away, he wanted her to mix his ashes with the glitter.
That's a little creepy and
Yes.
obsessive.
Yes. Very creepy. The thing is, there's no evidence beyond his behavior
Right.
to indicate that he's the murderer.
So other than him dressing as Santa,
And visiting their home.
And
how does he
being-
like know the family? Like is
He was at their home 2 days before. I think he was
Right,
probably
but how
there.
does he know?
Like it was a Christmas party kind of thing.
But this obviously wasn't the first time I feel like he met.
I don't know. But he
Right.
was very touched by her, which is very creepy.
but
But they also like to
yeah.
play devil's advocate, like the idea of like he lost his daughter. Like this little girl is very sweet to him. Like I can see how that could like touch somebody. You know, you like have this deep pain in you, and like just that little moment, like even if it is, you know, maybe he's not creepy, maybe it was creepy.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to exonerate
Yeah.
him, but like you know, it just is. It's one of those things. Like I can understand why that would touch you. I can
Like
understand why that
the
would be
innocence of a
meaningful to
little
you.
girl giving you a gift
Yeah.
of a bottle of glitter.
Like,
Like
it's
that's so
Right.
sweet.
Maybe he like saw like
His daughter.
in her
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's definitely two sides. There is the creepy side, and there is the probably still a little bit creepy, but he was probably touched
think the
and
thing
seeing his
that-
daughter.
that-
But it has become so sensationalized.
Yeah. Well, at this point, yeah. I think the thing is like with all of these people, it's going to come down for me. Where were they? Like, how did they get out of the house? How did they get into the house?
Yeah.
And like, where were they when the police were there? Because there was no footprints on the outside. Like, we have no idea. Like, it just doesn't seem like anybody came in or out, unless they were a part of the crowd that were there when the Ramsey family called all their friends and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, well, where were they? Like, how do we know if they could have even been there at that moment?
Yeah. So this person will have an answer for that. So the next person is a man named Gary Oliva, and he was a neighbor of the Ramsey family. So in 2016, he was arrested for possession of inappropriate images of children. And in 2011, when he was arrested on drug charges, he was found to have a picture of JonBenet in his backpack.
Oh my goodness.
And when asked about why he had this picture in his backpack, he was quoted as saying, "JonBenet's murder touched me very deeply. I felt she was an exceptional girl whose death was an exceptional loss. I felt the need to build a monument, a shrine, to remember this little girl." So,
Weird.
Yeah, we already know he's not a good guy. So according to a friend of Oliva, he said that the day after JonBenet was murdered, he called his friend and said, "I hurt a little girl. I hurt a little girl." And he also apparently told his friend the location of the little girl he hurt, which was in Boulder, Colorado.
Oh.
So records from the area show that apparently there was no other girl that was harmed on the same night as JonBenet in the area. But of course, that's according to official records. And we know that there could be something that perhaps we don't know and is
Right.
not on the official record.
Right.
And I also think that we should take things that friends
Yeah.
are getting paid to discuss in an interview with a grain of salt.
True.
Call me crazy. But I think if you're the kind of person who would be friends with this kind of a person, you could be the kind of person to lie to make money
Fair.
off of
Yeah,
a
that's
horrific
true.
tragedy. I mean, his friend was arrested for
Yeah.
harmful images, and he's like, "Well, he was my friend." I'm like, "Well, maybe
Yeah.
we should choose our friends a little bit more
Yeah,
wisely,
that's
people." Oliva also apparently had a past of violence, specifically strangulation. And apparently he had attempted to strangle his own mother with a telephone cord in the past. Problem, Oliva's DNA was not a match to the DNA found at the crime scene. So we're going to see this a lot, is the question of the DNA.
Interesting.
And so I will say there was a concern that was brought up that potentially the DNA that was found at the crime scene could have been transfer DNA from the packaging of the clothes to the clothes. So when it was being packaged, the DNA got onto it, that it's not from the crime,
Okay.
that it's from the
Right.
transfer.
Okay.
So that kind of calls that into question. Another theory is a pageant dad, or a man who hung out at the pageants, named Todd Foose. So there are a lot of theories that surround her time in the beauty pageants. Beauty pageants for children are obviously a place where people who have these deranged minds can go and target children. So this theory about Todd Foose came from the jailhouse confession of a former beauty pageant mom whose daughter competed in pageants with JonBenet.
Okay.
So she said that there was a man named Todd Foose who was also present at the beauty pageants, and that he had this chance to study her and potentially want to kidnap her. She said that he would act strangely around the children, and that she caught him spying on the girls multiple times. And he also had an extensive criminal history, including a pattern of breaking into houses. So this informant also said that around the time he was saying that he was about to come into a lot of money, and that he had picked out an expensive car that he was going to buy when he got the money. So after the news of the murder came out, Foose was apparently talking about how the money never came through for some reason.
Okay, that's very suspicious, but how would he know the exact amount?
Right.
If he's just a random pageant dad.
So he's a random pageant guy, and he knows that John got the $118,000
Well,
Unless
I mean-
Patsy was like bragging about it.
Yeah.
Which
or
maybe.
he or
I
the
mean,
dad
I would
was.
probably brag about it. I would
Or-
brag about it.
But the note.
Yeah.
The note. I mean, just this guy doesn't seem like the type of guy to write like that.
True. So people think that he didn't work alone, and that he had a second person helping him.
Maybe.
So a lot of people think that there had to be two people. If the intruder theory is true, there had to be two people on account of the two sets of footprints. So if you have listened to many episodes, you know how I feel about jailhouse informants, and that we definitely need to take those with a grain of salt.
Right.
Apparently, workers at the prison found her to be considered a credible witness, and thus reported her theory to investigators.
But
His DNA also did not match.
that, and if he's also like anticipating coming into this amount of money, why would they kill her?
He already has a truck picked out.
Right.
Yeah, he wants the money.
Unless it was an accident or something.
But I
But
thought that you were in the
especially-
theory that it couldn't
Well,
be an
like
accident.
not like an accident that like they weren't planning on killing her.
But
something
especially if there was
happened and
two
they're
of
like,
them,
"Okay, we have
he
to."
had help. I don't really know exactly what could have gone wrong there. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he wants, like, it sounds like his motive is the money.
Yeah.
So I don't know why he didn't, like, actually kidnap her.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I can think of is like if they were interrupted while the kidnapping happened.
By who?
I don't know, the mom when she woke up. Like we don't know what time the kidnapping was happening. So maybe when the mom got up, like, and again, and like none of these are perfect because it's like all this weirdness with like the note and then
Yeah.
all this other stuff, and it just is like okay, so like maybe they got interrupted and so they're like, oh crap, well, we can't just like let her go and we can't get out of here with her, so we just need to kill her. But again, they like still tortured her and all that stuff, so it kind of like speaks to maybe it was, I don't know. It just is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
The note throws everything off. The DNA. There's so many things about this case that just throw everything off, which is really frustrating.
Yeah. Another person who's kind of been connected to Todd Foose is a man named Michael Helgoth, and he was a local mechanic. And he's at the center of a lot of theories, specifically all of the theories where there were two people involved in the killing. So after the murder, there's this big press release where the message was relayed that said, we have a list of suspects and we are going to just eliminate all the subjects until you are the only one on it. And we're going to find you. Talking to the killer. So very shortly after this press release, Michael Helgoth was found dead after a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So in his home was found a stun gun and some high-tech boots that were similar to the prints found outside of the home. The boots were turned over to the Ramsey family. I don't know why. Who then turned them over to the police.
This investigation is so frustrating.
Yeah, I don't know why
Yeah.
they gave him to
Like-
the family.
And John said that the police were very quick to dismiss the boots as evidence because they said they weren't the right size for the prints. So he's like, I
Right,
gave
but
them
if
this
there's
evidence
two
and they
people-
didn't turn it over. They didn't really look at it. And I'm like, why would something that was found in his apartment after his death be given to the Ramseys?
Right.
Right.
Like,
Like who gave it to them?
who, how, why? Like, that doesn't make sense.
This is such bad. Everything about this investigation is like the wrong thing, which is what makes it so impossible to figure out who
Yeah.
actually did it. Like the killer got away because everybody botched this. The police botched it. The
It's
family
very
botched it
frustrating.
if they were not involved. Like it's just so frustrating because it's like they probably could have caught the killer if they did it right, but they did everything wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So unfortunately, we can't say whether or not he was responsible, as he is dead, and his family has not given permission to have his DNA tested. So this is the final person I'm going to talk about, and this is a man named John Mark Carr, and he was a local elementary school teacher. So he was actually arrested in 2006 after confessing to the murder via email to a journalism professor. So he said that he had drugged and assaulted JonBenet and that he had accidentally killed her afterwards. So he had been emailing this professor for about 4 years and kind of gaining trust before he confessed to the crime. So in the emails, he used language and wording that was similar to the wording in the ransom note. And he also used the nickname of Patsy's mother in one of the emails, and her nickname was Nettie, which people were like, how would he even know that? He said that he was in love with JonBenet and that he had hit her on the head with a flashlight. So when authorities caught up with him, he was living in Bangkok, Thailand, where he had fled after he was charged with possessing inappropriate images of minors. So after he was arrested, the district attorney of Boulder issued a formal apology to the Ramsey family and said that no one in the family was considered a suspect because he confessed.
Okay.
However, his DNA was not a match to the DNA found at the scene, and so he was not able to be charged with the murder. And the former chief of police and lead detective on the case said that when they read the confession, it became clear within 18 hours that he was not the guy. that he did not match that what he said didn't match the evidence at the crime scene, and that apparently he was not even in the state at the time of the murder, and he was in Georgia.
So why did he confess?
Because he's sick.
Yeah, maybe.
Also, there were no drugs in JonBenet's system, which is another strike against him. So basically, he confessed. We know he's a sick man,
Yeah.
but it's pretty
He's
clear
not,
he didn't
yeah.
do it.
Right.
So a lot of people think that the murderer could also be someone that isn't even on police's radar, as there were dozens of registered sex offenders who lived in the area who could have been responsible for her death. So now we've kind of talked about some of the theories. Now we're going to just talk to kind of conclude what happened with the family after the murder. So a few months after, the family moved back to Atlanta, Georgia, because of all the negative media attention they were getting. So JonBenet had a memorial service on New Year's Eve, and she was buried in Atlanta next to her half-sister Beth, who passed away in a car accident. And the family released a memoir about the event in 2001 called The Death of Innocence. In 2005, Patsy passed away after battling ovarian cancer for the second time at the age of 49. And John lost all of the millions that they had when JonBenet was still alive. So in 2010, the case was officially reopened with the use of new DNA testing technology. And this confirmed that the DNA came from 2 unidentified males instead of 1.
So it was 2 people.
Which would, if you believe that either 2 intruder theory or the 2-person theory. So in 2016, Burke did an interview with Dr. Phil, which was the first time he had ever spoken out about the murder. So it was a bombshell, and it actually played his interviews with the police and the social workers from when he was a child. And it led a lot of people to think that Burke was the one who had killed his sister. And this was because people thought he was just acting weird. Like his facial expressions were off, he was smiling, and people thought that he just sounded suspicious. But of course, I mean, how do you expect someone who's grown up in this way to talk?
Right.
I mean, regardless, he's traumatized from the death of his sister and from the media that came after that.
Yeah.
So you don't expect that he's going to be a well-adjusted young man.
Right.
In the same year, CBS aired a program that heavily implied that Burke was the killer,
That's sad.
even though he had been cleared with DNA testing and he was never considered a suspect.
Yeah.
So he ended up suing CBS for $750 million for defamation, and the case was settled in 2019 with undisclosed terms. So as of May 2nd of this year, John Ramsey had petitioned the governor of Colorado to allow an outside agency to take over the DNA testing from the murder, claiming that the Boulder Police Department had not worked quickly enough to conduct the DNA testing and that there was no progress being made despite the availability of DNA.
I mean, that's true.
Right. And the petition is still in the process of being reviewed. So unfortunately, after all of these years and with all of the speculation, the case is still unsolved. And as we get farther and farther away from it, it does bring about the question of whether it will ever be solved. But then I think of things like the Golden State Killer, and he was just arrested. He committed those crimes in the 70s and 80s, and he was just arrested this year. And it kind of brings that hope that maybe one day justice will be served for JonBenet.
The thing is, though, even if they do find the killer, justice isn't served. Like, they botched it. They
Yeah.
I mean, who knows if they would have caught the killer if they did everything right. They would
Yeah.
have had a heck of a lot better chance. And at this point, it's like it's been almost 30 years since then. And, like, yes, you can catch that, but, like, JonBenet's mother died without knowing who the killer was. John Ramsey, like, lost everything. Like, Burke lost his childhood.
It's a very...
Like, unless they're involved, obviously, like, this has been such a traumatic thing for this family. And, like, there's no real resolution at this
Yeah.
point. There's catching the
Yeah.
killer, which obviously they should do, but there's not really justice.
Yeah.
Which
It
is
was-
just sad.
It was very sad. I was watching this video, a documentary, and it was Elizabeth Vargas was the reporter, and she was interviewing John. And she asked him, like, how do you feel knowing that you might die without knowing who killed your daughter? And she said, Patsy passed away without knowing who killed, JonBenet. How do you feel knowing that could be you? And it was just very difficult to watch. I mean, regardless of your suspicions, it was difficult to watch a father answer that question and, just kind of have to live with that reality. So Jaclyn, I'll start with you. Who do you think was the person who might have killed JonBenet? Do you think there's a reason? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I've always kind of been in the camp that like the family is involved in some way. But I mean, some of the like intruder theories are like compelling. And also like, despite some of the evidence that would point to the family, like I really don't want to believe that they would do that. So I don't know. It could be somebody in the family. It could be somebody outside the family. It could be a combination. Like, I truly have no idea.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating.
Yeah. Ethan?
Yeah, I'm definitely in the same camp where I'm like, honestly, like, I have no idea. Because there seems to be so many things and so much evidence that does point to the family, but then there's so many things and so much evidence that points away from them that it's like really hard to tell. And it just comes back to the fact that it was so poorly handled at the time that it raises a lot of suspicion about the family.
Yeah.
And if they were involved, like, that's awful and horrible. But I'm like, I just don't see a motive. I don't see like why would they have done that? But then it's like the intruders, like, why would they have left that note? Why would they have done the things that... It's very, very confusing. And, like, obviously whoever did it was very sick and, like, disturbed. And it's awful.
Yeah. I'm on the same page as you guys. I think that... I don't know if I think it was the family, but I do think it was someone close to the family. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was one of the friends that came over after the fact, because to me it seems like they knew the house. They knew, like, they would know where to find things. They would know, like something that was said was like the carpet in the room where she was found was super, super thick. So you could walk around down there and no one would hear you. And so the house was huge. I mean, it had like 15 rooms. And so I think it was someone who knew the house, knew the family, knew kind of what their schedule was, knew what their plans were, and also knew that they were close enough that if they showed up at the house as a support person, that if any evidence was found towards them, it would kind of muddy the waters.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that kind of course, then that makes me like, the police should have kept it a closed thing, which is frustrating, but I don't want to say that it was a family because I think it's unfair. I mean, Patsy's dead. It's unfair to like accuse someone.
Right.
And I did feel, I felt for John watching that interview because you could tell he was heartbroken his daughter was dead.
And you would think that the DNA, because they found 2 sets of DNA, like you'd think that they would have found that it was a match to someone in the family by now if it was one of them.
And they were all cleared.
Right.
Yeah.
So I do think that it was someone close to the family, and they knew if I show up, then my DNA will be at the crime scene, and it will muddy the waters enough that I'll at least get a, mistrial.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, it's like a very tragic, horrible case, and I think it's very sad that she was put in a position where she was the subject of like so much media attention. Because at the end of the day, she's a child.
Yeah.
Like, even though she was in these beauty pageants and she was in a public forum, like, children should not be put in adult situations. Children should not be put in public forums like this.
Right.
It's like the same thing with like the family bloggers of today. Kids should be just allowed to be kids. And I think that we as a society need to be making sure that our highest priority is protecting children and protecting our children, making sure they grow up in a safe environment. And so it's really sad to see that this, is still unsolved and that it's gone on for so long. But yeah, it's a very difficult case. So on that note, we want to thank you guys for tuning in, listening, share your thoughts with us in the comments below, politely, gently. This is
Just say that.
anyways. We also want to thank Jaclyn, of course, for coming on with the last 2 episodes. I feel like you had some really good insight, and so it's really great to hear your point of view. Let us know if you want Jaclyn to come on again.
Please
And
say
if you
yes.
don't, we never will.
Yeah.
And if you say no, then that doesn't matter. 'Cause
Honestly,
she's
too
my
bad.
sister.
She's probably gonna come on.
Yeah, she's my sister,
Yeah.
so I don't really care. But
We'll have you on in another 2 years.
Okay.
right. So yeah, let us know what you guys think, and we'll be back next week. Bye.
Bye.